everybody, and welcome. So I hope you had a fabulous day yesterday, and I apologize in advance for the bright orange suit. If it's causing anybody a dazzle with a hangover, then you'll just have to squint. But I do hope you had a superb time last night. I'm sorry I couldn't join you, but it's probably just as well, because I think the delivery of this would be a bit impaired had I come out with you to your dinner. So it's really nice to be here. My name is Gorski. I work for Rolls Royce, and before anybody asks me whether or not I get a company car, not that Rolls Royce. So we sold the car brand to BMW about 40 years ago. When I talk about Rolls Royce here, I'm talking about Rolls Royce, the global power business. So we make jet engines, we make static power generation technologies, we make microgrids, we make small modular nuclear reactors. You might have seen them in the press. Really excitingly, over the next decade or so, we're going to be shrinking our small modular nuclear reactors down to tiny little nano-sized nuclear reactors, sticking them on space rockets, and making it possible for us all to go to Mars, which I think is incredibly exciting. But that is something that we're working on over the next decade or so. So those are the kinds of technologies that my colleagues in Rolls-Royce work on all of the time. They're complex, they are mission critical, they are at the cutting edge of the laws of physics, they increasingly engage with questions of electrification, questions of sustainability, questions of hybridization, questions of how we move away from carbon fuels and into a greener and more sustainable future. So I'm really proud to be part of that organization. Over the last 5 years, I've had the role of Group Director of R² Data Labs, which is Rolls-Royce's data analytics and artificial intelligence unit. Very recently, in the last 3 or 4 months or so, we publicly launched the spin-out of the R² Factory from R² Data Labs, and I'm also the CEO of the R² Factory. And R² Factory takes some of the things that I'm going to talk about in this presentation and brings them to other industrial clients as well as Rolls-Royce. So I just wanted to set that context for you very briefly. So this is Rolls-Royce, the parent brand, and I've talked a little bit already about our future and the innovation trends that are driving us forward as a global power company. Electrification, that fusion of mechanical and electrical technologies, particularly in the e-aircraft space. Digitalization, the bringing together of the physical realities of the world with the kind of cutting-edge digital technologies that R² Data Labs and R² Factory specialize in. And then meeting this growing demand for cleaner, safer, and more competitive power across the world. And that's why our group vision, as Rolls-Royce, is pioneering the power that matters. We focus on those kinds of cutting-edge technologies that can deliver the cleanest, safest, and most competitive solutions to meet the planet's vital power needs. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how you go about doing that when you're trying to move an organization like Rolls-Royce, which has been around for 130 plus years, into a 21st century paradigm, into a space where the pace of innovation is increasing radically, where there are many new novel ideas coming from the startup community that want to present completely new business models or new ways of going about some of these questions. How do you actually thrive as a traditional, if you like, sort of heavy-duty engineering and manufacturing organization in that world? And this really was the question that R² Data Labs was originally formed to help Rolls-Royce to solve when we started back in 2017. So the key questions, I guess, in this pivot or perish paradigm is the enterprise of the previous century still fit for purpose in this century? What does it take to be a 21st century enterprise? How do you change yourself in order to be able to meet that challenge of being fit for purpose? And how do today's leaders transform those traditional business models and the organizational structures that underpin them in order to deliver operations that can thrive today and in the future? And let's just look a little bit at some of the data that we've got here. So 50% of the S&P 500 companies, when asked, expected to be replaced over the next 10 years, and that was a survey done, I think, in 2019. 72% of CEOs believe that the next 3 years are more critical to their success than the entirety of the last 50 years have been. 39% of CEOs say disruption in their sector is going to either weaken or eliminate some traditional leaders. And 57% of CEOs are concerned that their organization doesn't have the right sensing capabilities and innovative processes in order to respond to or avoid rapid disruption. And for me, this question of building collaborative innovation ecosystems really addresses most pertinently that last point. When we're thinking about the creation of an innovation ecosystem, what we're thinking about doing is adding an external brain to the internal corporate brain that already exists, adding an entirely new sensing capability. It's like we're giving corporations a sixth sense. We're giving them a way of understanding and reading what's happening in the marketplace so that they can pull their organization forward and avoid that downward curve from that inflection point, that decline part of the curve, instead hitting that inflection point with the ability to respond. So I'm sure this is probably quite a familiar drawing to many of you, so I apologize if I'm sort of going back over things that you already know and think about. But this is essentially the iterative, agile development cycle. So I spend a lot of time inside large industrial organizations talking to them about agile. And either they know what it is and are scared, or they don't know what it is and sometimes still scared, or in some rare examples, they know what it is and they're actually already using it effectively. But it's still quite unusual in traditional manufacturing, engineering, industrial businesses to find organizations who really embrace the notion of learning through iteration. Many of those traditional organizations are still very focused on an approach to innovation which seeks to remove as much risk as possible before you start. And Agile is not like that. Agile is it's a bit like an onion. So in Agile, you start in the middle of the onion and you just do a little thing that learns a little thing. And once you've got that right, you then go back and you iterate again and you do a slightly bigger thing and you learn a little bit more. And then you iterate again and you do a slightly bigger. So it's like building the skin, the shell of an onion out from the center. Traditional waterfall projects are a bit like slicing the onion right down the middle, right? As in, you can see all of the risk, but you're going to cry a lot. Because it's painful and it takes ages. And there's a really long time before value can get delivered. To keep this new 21st century organization alive, to keep that new sensing capability you're trying to build through your ecosystem actually functioning as a sensing capacity, to stop it withering and dying on the vine, you need to feed it things to show its value. It needs to be able to iteratively demonstrate how it's helping you transform your organization. So you need to find a clear need, you need to observe that need and prioritize it, you need to think rapidly about concepts, and then you need to narrow those concepts down in order to go into a whole prototyping loop that you can then learn from. And you keep going round that loop and building out your ideas and getting feedback in order to build the shell of that onion out from the middle. And this approach, lots of organizations talk about doing it. Not many organizations are actually very good at making it happen. So I want to talk to you, I guess, first of all, about the very first phase of, I'm just going to take this on a couple, there we go, about how Rolls Royce approached this exact question. So I mentioned before that in 2017, we put in place, and I was part of the management team that set it up, R² Data Labs. And R² Data Labs sat inside Rolls Royce as part of this activity to help that traditional organization get itself fit for purpose to occupy this 21st century world. And we really sat in this box of sustaining innovation. So occupying a space within Rolls-Royce's current understanding of the market and focusing on improving the existing value networks. So helping the existing business to get more fit for the future. So that's where R² Data Labs really sat for Rolls Royce. There are 4 other boxes on here, and I'll talk about a couple of them later on, but I just want to put R² Data Labs in your mind in that box, because that's really what we were doing. And our vision was about making data think, and the approach that we took to that was by collecting data streams from both inside Rolls-Royce and indeed contextual data from the outside world, putting it through a collaborative ecosystem of partners sourced from the outside world, from academia, from startups, from strategic technology partners, people who had similar experiences to us, people who had different experiences to us, people who could teach us things, people who we could teach things. And alongside that collaborative ecosystem, having in the core of R² Data Labs a kernel of advanced data analytics, AI, and machine learning capability that was homegrown, that we had built ourselves. And by combining those 2 strands together, the external innovation community and the small kernel of internal capability, we could really push forward the boundaries of data innovation in order to develop new services for Rolls-Royce to use with its customers and to deliver new actionable information to help Rolls-Royce transform itself. Now, why did we need to take that ecosystem-led, that outside-in approach? Because in a traditional engineering company, you have lots of very, very, very smart people, and they create very high barriers to entry by controlling all of the intellectual property associated with technology development inside the organization, right? You don't go and share that stuff. That's your secret sauce, it's, oh my goodness. So here's this bunch of digital mavericks sitting in the middle of the company going, we'd like to participate in sharing, please. We want to bring an ecosystem in. We want to talk to them about our problems and share data with them. How did we get that message across inside a big traditional engineering business? Well, the reality is there are some really critical challenges in the context of applying artificial intelligence to industrial problems. And the first is a combination of these top 2 boxes on the left-hand side here. Industrial data is highly imperfect. Much of it's been collected over centuries. Rolls-Royce is a 130-year-old company plus. Most of its data is not in a state fit for training ML models. And indeed, much of its data is also highly sparse. And it's sparse for a good reason. Failure data in industrial data sets is sparse because industrial companies are actually quite good at managing safety processes. So, things don't fall out of the sky. Nuclear power stations don't blow up very often. These are all very good things that we are all grateful for, but it means if you're trying to train an ML on predicting a failure incident, the features in the data set are simply not present to be able to do so effectively. So there's a big data sparsity issue for AI solutions in industrial use cases, at the same time as an incredibly high requirement for fidelity. These are safety critical or mission critical processes. The outcomes of getting this wrong could be catastrophic to human life. And therefore, you need a very, very high standard of fidelity to be able to effectively feel confident in the models that you're building. On top of that, real-time applications for consuming artificial intelligence in industrial processes need AI to happen at the edge. Most big manufacturing engineering organizations are not even in the cloud, let alone able to run AI at the edge. So there's clearly a need to be bringing partners who have the kinds of adaptability that would allow that sort of activity to happen. You need to be able to think in the context of an organization like Rolls-Royce, who have representation in the defense sector. We operate within a triad of information assurance challenges: the security of the data, the export control status of the data, and then, of course, the GDPR management of the data, which is addressed by many organizations. But also, for industrial use cases, there is a very complex and challenging fusion that has to happen between the domain experience needed to interpret the data and the digital technologies that you need to actually provide those insights. This scenario essentially simply points to the fact that no industrial organization is going to be able to do all of that by itself unless it's prepared to invest hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds in developing its AI capability. So the only answer then is to think about how you work in open collaborative models. So this is the answer that we came up with inside Rolls Royce and that we've now taken forward into our work in the R² factory. And what this really says is there are very limited places for industrial applications of AI where it's possible to develop competitive differentiation. So over on the left-hand side of this chart, you have all of the things that have to come from collaboration with an open ecosystem. Because frankly, it's either not affordable to build it yourself, or there's so little competitive advantage that comes from building it yourself, it's not the right place to be prioritizing your investment. So most algorithms and source code come from participation with the open technology ecosystem or through partnerships with academic institutions. Most new use cases actually come from the startup community. You can pour some money into the right secured collaboration platform and the right amount of high-performance compute, but ultimately that's just a kind of increasingly commoditized, prices dropping all of the time game, so it's hard to secure competitive advantage from the investments placed there. But where you can get commercial advantage, where you can get differentiation if you're an industrial organization, is by having really well-engineered training data. And most industrial organizations have terribly badly engineered training data. And by investing the time and effort into making sure your operations, your human beings inside your organization, are actually ready to incorporate artificial intelligence workflows into their human workflows. Because if you don't do this piece, if you don't invest the time and the effort in creating AI-capable operations, you can have the cleverest data scientists with the best algorithms, and indeed even the best organized training data in the world, and arguably all you really should be doing is putting them in an ivory tower with a pile of £50 notes and a box of matches. Because it doesn't matter how much good work they do, it won't get adopted in your organization, and as a result, it won't actually output value generation. This is the ecosystem we built for Rolls Royce as R² Data Labs. You can see it focuses both on business model innovation on one hand, which is directed towards our three main operating businesses, the civil, the defense, and the power systems businesses. And then on the right-hand side, it focuses on four key technology innovation areas: AI and advanced analytics, blockchain and quantum, autonomous and sensing, and industrial IoT. And we built that ecosystem capability out all across the world. This is just the map of our AI, the first slice of that pie I just showed you. So I've got all of them in here. This is just illustrative. But our AI pie slice operated in the UK, in Germany, and in Singapore, and engaged with government entities, with academic entities, with startup communities and innovation communities, and indeed with strategic technology partners. And this is how that ecosystem works. And it's a circular, iterative cycle. You start by starting and learning about the technology and space that you want to be in. You create these expert hubs, combining all of the players in the ecosystem that you want to work with, and develop those, and fund those, and support those, and build communities around those in order to derive value from the application of those technologies and ideas from your partnership network to those big industrial problems, creating value right from the start in that iterative building out the onion manner that I described at the beginning. So I've talked about where R² Data Labs sat in terms of its support for Rolls-Royce in building out these technology innovation ecosystems and collaborations. And now I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about where the R² factory sits. The R² factory has spun out of inside of R² Data Labs. It's a community of about 50. And what we've done is taken the learnings of the last 4 or 5 years, which, by the way, have delivered more than, well, about $500 million worth of value generation to Rolls-Royce. And we're now applying that learning not only to Rolls Royce as a client, but also to other industrial companies like Rolls Royce. So organizations that are asset intensive, that are mission critical, that are dominated by physical processes, and for the most part that are, more than 50 years old. And the difference here is the positioning of what those two entities do. R² Data Lab still exists within Rolls Royce. It's still there. It's about 250 people around Rolls Royce. It's federated into the business units so that they can still access all of that capability. And R² Factory really sits in this incremental innovation box. So we are working across our industrial client base to create rapidly growing improvements to existing products and services that help to extend or maintain a competitive position over time. But we are also aggressively moving those companies into the spaces of radical innovation and disruptive innovation. So most of our clients come to us to increment what they already have, but very quickly move into the space of either completely disrupting their businesses or the economies that they work in by creating a totally new business model, or by creating a completely new value network for our clients, by disrupting their existing market or creating a new market. So I think that the difference between the two things is in the speed at which that they move the relationship into some of those new areas of innovation. And so I just wanted then to take the opportunity to show you a little bit about what the R² Factory is. We are a community of agile change makers. We really live and breathe this notion of being an innovation ecosystem. Since 2017, we've been harnessing data analytics and AI to deliver more than, it's about, as I said, it's about $500 million worth of value for Rolls Royce. And we not only do that with the application of technology, critically we do that by helping organizations like Rolls Royce to take their people on that cultural transformation journey to make sure that that value actually shows up in their bottom line. These are the sorts of areas that the R² Factory works with clients on. And we genuinely believe that the scale of the sorts of challenges that organizations like Rolls-Royce and other big industrial giants face can't be solved alone. For us, collaboration is essential in order to generate sustainable solutions that make a really genuine impact. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I was encouraged to ask if there were questions. I'm not sure how much time we have, but yes. So, are there any questions? There's one, brave man, thank you.
Thanks ever so much for the presentation. Obviously, the conference on global expansion, and you've got the private, not subject to export control on the base of the slides. I noticed to start off it was Rolls Royce Deutschland. How are you squaring that with the export controls, security controls, CFIUS powers, and some of the other emerging threats to expansion in certain sectors?
It's a very good question, and you're absolutely right. One of the extraordinarily excruciating things about trying to launch a data innovation startup out of a large industrial, apart from the excruciatingness of doing that anyway, is that we've chosen to do it out of a large industrial that operates in aerospace and defence. Which, if you were going to ask me, is there a lesson that I've learned? We don't try and do that. It's very hard. Because, and interestingly, one of the reasons why R² Factory is doing significantly more work with other industrials in its early stages. So if I look at the revenue generation, we are revenue generating for R² Factory, we're about 75% non-Rolls-Royce revenue. And part of the reason for that is actually many of the other industrials we work with don't face the same ITAR export control restrictions that Rolls-Royce faces. So it's much easier for us to collaborate around their data. But what they do like is that when they come to R² Factory, we have 5 years of experience of working in collaborative contexts on ITAR and export control data. We understand how to desensitize data, we understand how to anonymize data, we understand how to treat it safely and securely, and we bring with us the the information assurance rules that allowed us to do that within an aerospace and defense business, so that they feel very safe working with us. But you are indeed correct. There are whole territories that we are currently not actively approaching because they raise real issues with some of those regulatory restrictions, which are there for good reason, but do create some boundaries about what it's possible to do. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Yes, Cyrus.
How much of your work is driven towards quantum technology?
Good question. So, yes, Cyrus asked how much of our work is focused on quantum technology with regards to the startups that we work with. So, for Rolls Royce has a fellow, a couple of fellows in fact, who are focused entirely on investigating the application of quantum to some of the use cases for Rolls Royce. And obviously, if you think about the compute load that's required for doing CFD, computational fluid dynamics, for example, it's huge, it's vast. An effective quantum processing capability for CFD would make a massive difference, not just to us, but to anybody who's thinking about fluid dynamics in kind of the development of complex machinery. However, having said that, the current quantum marketplace is quite a long way away from being able to provide answers to those questions that meet that extreme fidelity point that I mentioned on that box slide. So in Rolls-Royce's universe, balancing between more novel and radical ways of thinking about getting answers, but being able to authenticate the fidelity of those answers creates a real seesaw for us. So the answer is a watching brief on quantum, quite a lot of skepticism, quite a lot of wanting to understand, well, you might be able to do something interesting with cryptography, but can you actually completely redesign an aerofoil geometry in a way that means the plane isn't going to fall out of the sky? Not really sure yet. There was another question at the front here, and then I will come to the gentleman in the white jacket.
Hi. I had a question on when you're building innovation ecosystems, and especially when you bring in startups, they work at a different pace.
Yes.
Compared to any legacy organization. I'm curious to sort of know how have you managed that challenge of different pace, agility, and how that has worked or not?
A really good question, and that goes back to that agile cycle slide that I showed you, the one that so many of my colleagues kind of go, what do you mean we're just going to start without knowing all of the things that we're asking questions about first? So R2 Data Lab's role for quite a lot of what we do and did over the last 5 years has really been to act as a sort of safe, soft landing space for startups in what can otherwise be an extremely bruising experience. Now, we didn't get that right all of the time. Sometimes we created an appetite for innovation in small pockets in Rolls-Royce that then got stuck when it kind of went up a couple of layers in the organization. So sometimes, we didn't do as good a job as we would have liked to. But I think what we worked through over time, and it shows up in what we call our value delivery methodology, which is the way we show the corporate business how value is being realized in their world through the application either of my team or of a startup's activity. And wrapping that methodology around the work of the startups made it easier for us to talk the language of the corporate, but also maintain the speed of the startup. And there was a question from the gentleman wearing a white jacket.
What have you observed about the difference in skill mix, the percentage of effort adopting the new methodology, the way it worked before in terms of core number of time, days spent in coding, tests, and for that?
Good question. So I can give you one example. I'm just searching my memory banks for the actual data. Forgive me whilst I go and find some RAM. So one of the things that we did with agile methodology was we trained it out, starting at the top 100 execs in Rolls Royce. So we knew if we were going to get ourselves into a position where we could do what the previous gentleman asked about, which is find a way to get innovation clock speed up by using different approaches from the market, we learned that what we had to do was teach the top layer of the organization what that would feel like, so that they could then support the people who reported into them when they came to them with novel ideas. So in 2019, we launched an agile mindset training program for the top 100 at the annual Top 100 conference. And by the time we got to the end of 2019, we had trained 4,500 members of Rolls-Royce's senior and middle management in agile mindset. And that's what unlocked the possibility to then achieve some of the releases that came from applying agile as a methodology into business processes. So in one specific example, we increased the speed of, reduced the time associated with a program of work from, I think 18 months to 35 days. That's probably our best example. Anything else, or are we all done? I think we're all done. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope it was useful.